Hello, Ryan Nation. Now, am I talking about Ryan Blaney Nation or Ryan Van Blarkham Nation? Well, if you're an intellectual, you know that they're very, very intertwined. It is 9:07 on November 3rd. Obviously, it feels later than that because daylight savings time is over. But I am pleased to be able to come back to you this week. We had technical difficulties last week, bit of a rough week for me. But if you know the lore, you know that anytime I have a life-changing personal event happen, Ryan Blaney wins. So to everyone who is a Ryan Blaney fan and who wants to see NASCAR Cup Series champion on a Ryan Blaney diecast again next year, you're welcome, because we're getting a shot to go run for the championship 4. Now, I want another jacket, because this is one of my favorite things I own. Definitely worth the money. I want another championship shirt. Definitely worth the money. So, the fact that in the time he needed to be the most clutch driver ever, Ryan absolutely showed up in Martinsville again. He started 14th. One of the worst starting playoff drivers. And you know what? He freaking won. And if you know my story, and like I said, if you know how intertwined my life is with that man's career, and how every time I need it, never fails, I get a little bit of Blaney success after I go through something. So, once again proves he is the most influential person in my life. And that's so, like, if I said that, or if I, like, tweeted that, you would be like, oh, that's like a parasocial relationship. But he knows how much he means to me, and I've got to talk to him about it. And to be able to talk on this podcast about the fact that he has booked back-to-back spots in the championship 4, and that he's going to get to go run for another title in Phoenix next week. I'm a very, very happy person. And words can't say enough about how clutch of a performance this was on Ryan's part. And look, I need to add another date. And luckily there's room. I left room. So, let's talk about the nitty-gritty, though. Because we all know what happened. We saw it. Let's talk about Christopher Bell, William Byron, manufacturer manipulation, safety problems. Because that's what they're calling what Bell did. Listen, I saw that someone was like, well, if you look at the SMT data, he got loose, got up into the marbles trying to get around Bubba for that spot that he needed, and it basically screwed him, and he just had to ride the wall because it was the end of the race, and try not to, go to overtime, whatever. I think that definitely could have happened. Bell is a phenomenal, honest race car driver. My dad raced sprint cars against him when I was young. Fantastic guy. I can't say enough about him. But I do admit this playoff format breeds room for lots of dishonesty and lack of integrity. And I saw Marco Andretti tweeting about it. Like, there was manufacturer manipulation. Like, Brad Keselowski was like, this should be the straw that broke the camel's back on the playoffs. And I don't disagree. Now, I am a Blaney fan. I do realize how much we have capitalized on this playoff format. We're going back to the championship 4. And Kyle Larson is not in the championship 4. So I do realize the unique position I am in as a Blaney fan. But I also realize the entertainment factor behind it. I see why NASCAR keeps it around. As much as it feels stupid, honestly, when you think of a guy with 6 wins in a 38 race season, that's almost a sixth of the races. Of the races he has competed in before this weekend, or including this weekend, he has won a sixth of the races he has raced in, because obviously we know about everything with the waiver and the drama for the Coke 600. So, when you take that into account, it's insane. Truly insane that he's not in the playoffs. But this playoff format is all about maximizing the end of the season. It's about being clutch when it matters, and Ryan Blaney was clutch when it mattered. Now, I know they were listening to the radios on the 3 and the 1 about Chevy manufacturer manipulation and the Chevys clogging the track for Byron. So, I definitely think that's interesting. I definitely think we'll hear more about it. Now, I was at work watching this race, so obviously there's things I could have missed, but at the end of the day, Ryan Blaney was clutch. Rules were broken, but something else that stuck out to me is there were a couple of reporters trying to talk to Joe Gibbs after the race, and he wanted to appeal it, and I saw some tweets, everyone's like, oh, such a shame, la la la. But what is interesting to me is I saw some 2311 fans, Sarah and Phil. They're great people, absolutely some of my favorite people I've ever met through racing. They're part of my Twitter family. Sarah and Phil were like, if Joe had actually read through the charter agreement, they would probably want to join the charter agreement based on situations like this. Or, change what they're agreeing to, is what I'm saying. Because not being able to appeal something like this in a defining moment of the season where you could be sitting yourself to the championship 4, go race for a title, have another Toyota representing, or another car representing Toyota in the championship 4, but because NASCAR decided that's what it was, they put their foot down. You can't even be like, hey, look at this. You can't bring that SMT data. You can't defend, and you can't make an argument for yourself. I think, quite honestly, that's a load of crap. There's no better words for me to say that. I think I understand. Listen, I'll get to talking about Formula One in a minute, because that has been a whole nother thing this weekend. But I think being able to go to the stewards to race control and defend and bring evidence to back up your claim, you should be allowed to do that. You should be allowed to go to trial. You should be allowed to display evidence and fight your case. So I do think, as silly as it sounds with election week, this is election week in the United States, you should have a right to trial. But, at the end of the day, Ryan won. I'm so super happy. I had my canon event this week of, having, something horrible happen to me in my life, and, a Blaney win came out of it. So, I'm not saying I'm going to have a bad week this week, but if I have to have a bad week for Ryan to win another championship, for me to get tattoo number 16, listen, I'm not above it. But F1, let's talk about Formula One. Brazil, a double Alpine podium, a Max Verstappen win, and let me quote my older sister, who has not always been that into F1. My brother-in-law got her into F1. She said, let me see. I was talking about a hate watch. She said, spite and pure Dutch rage won Max this race. I don't disagree. Listen, I come from a family that is half Dutch. Yes, that Dutch rage It's a thing. It's a motivating factor. And listen, I don't want to, I don't have a whole lot of bias in F1. Obviously, I have Lewis Hamilton's number tattooed on my ankle. Like, that's my dog, right? But you either die the hero, aka you're a Max Verstappen hater, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Fond of Max Verstappen. And let me tell you, it best be my reputation era. It is my villain era. Max Verstappen, I am very fond of you. You rock my world. P17 to P1 in the rain at Interlagos is crazy. Now, I will say, they got lucky with some of these red flags, and some of these red flags and stewarding decisions this weekend, either not quick enough, or thrown too early, or, there was always something. It was always something, and I hated to see, some of the drivers that got caught up in it, that were the cause behind it, because, I wanted Franco Colapinto to do well in Latin America. So, you have to take the good with the bad. Costly weekend for Williams. You can't overstate how bad of a weekend it was for them. You could call it, that movie Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day? Yeah, for Alex Albon, yes. It was Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. And for Franco, listen, he was on fresh tires. He had already had problems. He had that collision with Oliver, so there's a lot of possibilities that the car could have already been damaged, and then going in for new, fresh tires, it was just kind of a melting pot that created this incident. At the end of the day, still costly for Williams. And the rain really did not help everything. Obviously, we had, qualifying. See, okay, in the Eastern time zone, because, I live in Indy, it was 5:30. Qualifying was at 5:30 this morning, with daylight saving time ending. And so it was an early one. And Brazil, I believe, is 2 hours ahead of us. Yeah, 2 hours. So, definitely a crazy one for the teams. I just want to say Alpine basically had a $50 million weekend. I can't say enough how happy I am for this team. This is huge. It is insane how good of a weekend it was for them. And to see these drivers who were friends in their childhood have had, they've butted heads their entire lives, though. And to see them come together to get to celebrate with this team and them getting a double podium. I saw on Twitter, because that's where I spend all my time, even when I'm at work. If you're my boss, no, that's not what I do. It was the only thing this season is missing is midfield team podiums. And we got it. We got a double Alpine podium. If you would have told me at the beginning of the year that that Alpine was slower than a tractor, that they would get a double podium in Brazil, I would have laughed in your face. You would have had to lock me up because I laughed that hard and because I let that laugh take that much control of my body. So definitely, yeah, absolutely amazing. It makes me so happy for that team, for those mechanics. I follow one of their mechanics on Instagram, Jason Cazzetto, I think is how you pronounce his last name. And just the pure happiness that you can see from everyone and the celebrations, that is what motorsports is all about. And I can't state enough how happy it makes me. Now, we get to move on to something that makes me a little emotional. So, Callum ran his last race for Jota this season in Bahrain. And Jota was on for such a great race. An incredible race. for an incredible achievement. They should have won. That car was moving. And then Will Stevens got a puncture, and obviously not really Will's fault. I mean, that tire was shredded by the time they got back into the pits. They had to go almost a full lap on it. It is kind of the end of an era. My man is coming back to Indy with Prema, obviously. It makes me sad that this journey is kind of at least on pause, because we all know that Gateway overlaps with Le Mans next year. We're probably not going to see any IndyCar drivers at the 24 Hours of Le Mans, which makes me really upset. And I'll probably be in St. Louis, but I would rather be in Le Mans. I'd rather be in, France for one of the most iconic races of all time. But I think this year at Joda, I had my memory the other day of, me breaking down in tears, trying to make myself go to class after the Callum and Juncos drama. And it was not pretty. It was not pretty. Snap memories did me dirty. And I believe a year ago today, Callum announced he was going to Joda. And I remember that one time Callum was on Racing Family, the Marshall Pruitt and Chris Wheeler Twitter space a couple years ago, maybe like a year and a half ago. And he talked about how IndyCar was his home and how it saved him. And God, I'm so happy he's coming back to us. And I can't wait to annoy him. I love him, but I can't wait to annoy him and see him all the time. And I can't wait for Issa to come to the 500 for us to make more memories with Callum and Katarina. But I think he needed Joda at this point in his career, and they needed him. And I think it was a wonderful partnership that worked out so much better than all of us ever could have imagined. I mean, Hypercar World Cup champions, right? So, privateer champions. That's awesome. That's awesome. He drove his ass off. I mean, first privateer team to win a race when they won in Spa. And that weekend is one of the best weekends of the race season I had. It was the first time since Daytona I had been at a track. That was the weekend Jacob won at IMS, and then Callum won the next day. And that was iconic race weekend for me. So I'm very happy with Callum's time in WEC, and I really hope we get to watch him. I really hope we get to watch him in hypercars again. I know he said the other day in an interview that he would love to do Daytona. It's all about when dates line up. So, as someone who is likely going to Daytona, I would love for that to happen again. Or for that to happen so that dates lined up again and that he could do some WEC or IMSA, because WEC cars come over and do the IMSA 24 hours of Daytona. So, it's all about, the WEC season is so interesting because if you think about the sheer amount of, Formula E drivers that drive in WEC and they still have Formula E conflicts even after all the time off in between races, it's kind of ridiculous. But speaking of Formula E, due to the flooding in Valencia, Spain, the testing got moved. It will be this coming weekend. They're still doing the all-female test, which I'm very excited about. I think a team to watch is Andretti, definitely. Chloe Chambers is someone that sticks out to me. She's great. She is Indiana grown. She's one of our own. So very excited for her to get this opportunity to test with Andretti. And I think there are some interesting driver lineups. that, or like for the female test, I think Jaguar probably has one of the strongest. But I think it'll be interesting to see the times that come out of it. It's very heartbreaking to see how Valencia has been affected by the floods. I know MotoGP talked about it, and I know Formula E said they were going to do all they could to help the community out in this time. So it's nice to see that they are pitching in to help the community. But, you know, Formula E's first race is next month, December. Kind of insane how quickly it's all coming back. But then I think about the season ended in like July, so it's not really that crazy. Their second race is in Mexico on my birthday, and so one of my home countries on my birthday, and I'm not going to be there. But if you know me, you know I like hockey, so here's a little personal lore. I'm probably going to drive to South Bend, Indiana, where Notre Dame is. I'm going to go watch them play the Michigan Wolverines in men's ice hockey, because one of my favorite NHL prospects, Jacob Truscott, plays for the Michigan Wolverines, which should be like a crime, because, you know, I go to an IU campus, but oops. Yeah. So, a little, you know, if you want the little Ryan T, got back into hockey recently. Been very excited about that. Spending Thanksgiving by myself. Probably both holidays, Christmas and Thanksgiving by myself. And I'm going to Chicago to watch the Blackhawks play the Dallas Stars, because that's my team. And my favorite player is Mason Marchment. That's very important to know. So, if you ever get a quiz on, like, Ryan Van Blarkham lore, definitely think that you should be like, oh, Ryan lore. Ryan loves Mason Marchment. I do. So, I think I will leave you with this. We have some stuff to talk about in IndyNXT, and you know that's my favorite thing to yap about. Juncos Hollinger Racing signed a former rally driver, a Paraguayan rally driver, to one of their seats this week. It kind of came out of left field if you know anything about if you know much about the IndyNXT scene. But Miguel Garcia, like I said, he's Paraguayan. He competed in TC2000 touring car championships. He did a weekend of French Formula Regional. He did Italian GTs with Lamborghini. So he has raced against some interesting drivers. Some former F1 drivers in Italian GT cars, and he can hold his own. He's got multiple top 10s, so it'll just be interesting to see, like, you know, he didn't test in Barber. In fact, at Barber they tested with the USF 2000 champion, which very interesting to see him. He didn't really pace the field, but he definitely or not USF 2000, USF juniors. He's going into USF 2000. He kept great pace, honestly, like all things considered. So very happy about that. Will be interesting to see the way that if, like, we obviously know he's going to go to Pro 2000 so he can try to win the scholarship, or, you know, he's going to do 2000. I know he did some 2000 races. He'll probably do USF Pro 2000, but seeing him adapt to the IndyNXT equipment quickly is very interesting. We had the Chip Ganassi Racing drivers announced. So Niels Coolin, it's an interesting choice. His father owns Booking.com. Very rich, lots of money. I can see the appeal. But I don't want to say he's talentless, because obviously, like, you have to have a little bit of talent to make it up the ladder, even if you have money. But in HMD cars, which had won the previous championship, the previous 2 championships, he struggled in, like, the very back of the field. And then he drove an F2, yeah, for some teams at the back of the grid, and struggled around in the back of the grid while his teammate was contesting for wins. So I get it, but sometimes you wish that other choices would have been made. I do love the other driver. Jonathan Brown is one of my favorite people in the paddock. I love him. I love his girlfriend. I love his whole team. Just filled with great people, even if he's a Bears fan. That's unforgivable. And he likes Arsenal. Again, well, unforgivable. But he makes up for it with being super kind, always willing to chat. Like I said, one of my favorite people ever. He recently ran the Dublin Marathon for charity. Love that. That says so much about the guy he is. And I can't wait for my cookies next year. His girlfriend is a baker, a great one. She comes highly recommended. So I'm very excited for my cookies she told me about. So can racing season hurry up? Obviously, Kiffin Simpson is going to the 8. We had a hint that the car is going to be pink. Josh Butcher, who works for Chip Ganassi Racing and social PR comms area of the team, was like, pink in IndyCar, it'll never work. Which, that made me laugh, obviously, because we had 4 cars at one point that were pink on the grid. So, Josh being sarcastic. But very excited for Kiffin. Excited to see what year 2 will bring, what being in the 8 will bring. Seeing a little bit more focus on each car, obviously with the downsize of the team for the charter system. So, I think there's a lot to look forward to. I'm ready for St. Petersburg. If I'm not careful, I will be attending St. Petersburg, to be honest with you. Group road trip, who says no? But, yeah, that is kind of it for me this week. Let's see. What is the question I want to ask? Who is your early prediction for the Formula E title pre-testing? I am always going to say Mitch Evans. I'm a little biased. I love that man. Hoping to attend my first Formula E race next season with my friend Maria in Miami. So, yeah, who is your early prediction for the Formula E championship? And that is all for today. Giving you a Sunday night episode, or at least a Sunday night filmed episode. But I am Ryan Van Blarkum. This was Whispering Wheels. Happy whispering. Bye.